Great, thank you very much everyone for joining. We will start this webinar, and thank you everyone. This webinar is the beginning of a series of webinars that we intend to do at BirdLife International, the international NGO that is having this effort to care about birds, humans, the environment, and the overall nature. And there is this interest with the energy sector. Once energy is generated, it must be transported to the end user. This infrastructure will occupy space within the landscape and can pose significant risk to the birds and biodiversity. The countries in the region in the scope of our workshop of today, have significant plans for the development of energy, both renewable and conventional. These new and additional energy developments are driven by economic development and technological innovation, and will require construction of additional thousands of kilometers of power lines. Many bird species and bird populations potentially face significant risks associated with power lines. These risks include collision, electrocution, and disturbance displacement effect, as well as habitat loss. The collision and especially electrocution of large birds can cause damage to electricity lines and interrupt power supply, creating a challenging problem for power distribution, and especially if the frequency of such incidents are high. Such events may damage valuable equipment, and in many cases, large birds remain hanging on the lines and may lead to continuous failure of the circuit to re-energize the energy. This will entail additional costs and the intervention of maintenance crew to remove the bird. Such cases is one of the main important reasons for all outages in electricity distribution lines in many of the countries, and each single outage is an additional loss to both the companies and the customers. BirdLife International is implementing major projects with our donors, in particular MAVA Foundation, UNDP, JEF, and the EU Life, to deal and tackle this problem for specific species and in specific locations. This webinar is shedding the light on experiences of utility companies in dealing with this issue. We have three valuable presentations coming from the sides of the Mediterranean. The first, we will go with the first presentation with engineer Iman Saeed from Egypt, EETC, so that unfortunately she will have to join. She'll have to leave us afterwards due to emergency meetings. So we will have the presentation of engineer Iman. Then we will have some questions and answers on it so that we can allow her to leave. And then we proceed with the other two presentations of engineer Tariq from RSCN, shedding light on Jordan, and afterwards from Dr. Luca from also Italy, joining us from north of the Mediterranean. So I would ask all please participants to put their questions in the Q&A section, and remind us also for the Arabic speakers to choose the Arabic language in the interpretation button at the lower bar for those who would like to listen to the Arabic interpretation. And without further ado, I would kindly ask Engineer Iman to proceed with the presentation, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Usama, and thank you for BirdLife to give me that chance. It's the first time for me to cooperate with the BirdLife, but we hope that it will not be the last one, because already we are working as ETC 5 years ago in this field or in this subject, interested subject. Please, Mr. Osama, slides. We are working in the Egyptian electricity transmission company, and the Egyptian electricity transmission company is the sole company which is responsible for transferring the electricity from the generation to the distribution and the customers in Egypt. So the main activities in ETC is management and operation and the maintenance of the electrical energy transmission network all over Egypt. ETC responsible for regulation of the loads movements in the network of the high and extreme voltage levels. Also, ETC is responsible to purchase the produced electricity from the power generation plants and selling it to the consumers. As I mentioned, it's the sole company is responsible between the generation and distribution. The new activity for ETC, it's not recently new, but we started from about 10 years to contract with the private sector investors to implement the solar and wind projects in BO schemes. Also, ETC develops the electrical energy projects, the substation and the transmission lines, and the issue which is related to what will be concentrated today is the conducting of the environmental and the social impact assessment for the substations and also for transmission lines to be in compliance with EEAA, the environmental agency in Egypt, and the IFI's requirements. As I mentioned, ETC responsible to contract with the wind projects private sector. From that perspective, Egypt has announced that in 2035, we will reach to 42% from the energy mix from renewable. About 20% for that or 15% will be in wind projects. Depending on more on the private sector. We started with the private sector from 2010 and reach now to implement projects under operation now, one big project, 250 mega in Gulf of Suez, and another 250 mega under construction, and we have about 2 gigas in pipelines. You know that the wind projects and the transmission lines has a big relation with birds and has impact on bird migration, because most of these projects implemented in Gulf of Suez, and the Gulf of Suez considered as the most critical bases for bird migration all over the world. So Egypt has some initiatives. In 2015, in December 2015, the initiative was a protocol signed between the governmental entities, Egyptian Environmental Agency and the ETC, and the New and Renewable Energy Authority, and the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, to implement strategic and operational framework for the Gulf of Suez for the environmental impact assessment and the bird monitoring and also active turbine management program for the wind turbines in wind power plants. In January 2019, cooperation agreement was signed between ETC and RCRE for the management and the implementation of the active turbine management program to have the collective migratory and shutdown on demand for the wind power plants, especially for private investors in Gulf of South and Jabal Zayt, which ETC contracting with the developer about it. Why we have this agreement? Because ETC responsible to sign the power purchase agreement with the wind energy investors. And this agreement includes a schedule special for the bird migration protocol to manage and implement the active turbine management program, and that in cooperation with WEAA and RCRE. Establish the administrative and the technical and financial basis for the implementation of that program, and that led by RCRE at the expense of the wind investors, as well as the precaution measures and the bird monitoring and observation plans in the seasons for bird migration in autumn and in spring, and in accordance with the guidelines for environmental impact assessment of wind power plants by WEAA, which issued in October 2013. In the future, under this active turbine management program, ETC planned to install radars in the Gulf of South areas in the sites of investor plants, wind plants. So ETC will coordinate and deal with the Egyptian Armed Force with regards to the use of radars and the latest techniques in monitoring migratory birds, and to regulate the shutdown on demand operations for wind power stations in the HMB area in accordance with the environmental requirements and according to the monitoring protocols issued by WEAA. ETC will make all necessary agreements to obtain all permits required to facilitate the implementation of the HMB. ETC will provide the available and necessary technical data for investors within the scope of the HMB. The management and the implementation of the HMB is to determine the mechanisms and the times of closures of wind turbine using the radars and the new technologies when required according to standards and the mechanisms of shutdown issued by WEAA. In September 22, another cooperation protocol was signed between WEAA, especially between WEAA and ETC, and also another partner, the Migratory Soaring Bird Conservation Project, to enhance the cooperation in the field of preserving the environmental and biological diversity through a series of joint practical activities. The main areas of cooperation are ETC projects of substation and overhead transmission lines. As Mr. Osama mentioned, that the overhead transmission lines and wind plants are the main obstacles for birds in their migration, especially in the Gulf of Suez region, as well as the mechanism for protecting the migratory bird bases and the biological diversity. What are the mitigation measures EHC did and will take, inshallah, in future? EHC coordinates with EEAA regarding the sites of high sensitivity in bird migration routes when constructing the overhead transmission lines, especially those connecting to the wind power projects. EHC also installs the necessary reflective signs and colored balls on the overhead transmission lines locating in these buses, as well as implementing the programs to monitor the dead birds under the overhead transmission lines in Gulf of Suez and Jabal Zayt to ensure the effectiveness of the mitigation measures followed in the approval of EEAA. EEAA provides the technical support to EHC in the field of protecting the environment and the biological diversity, as well as providing the technical assistance with regard of studies of the environmental impact of the substation and overhead transmission lines projects. Examples for that mitigation, we have some recommendations done by the consultant who are conducting the environmental and social impact assessment, including the chapter of bird migration. Some of that examples or recommendations for the transmission lines: maintaining some spacing between the energized components of the transmission line and the grounded one. Considering the installation from the EPCs of EHC of the underground transmissions and distribution lines in sensitive areas, يعني replaced the overhead transmission lines. No, يعني to be not a hindrance for the bird in their buses. Depending on the location and the topography, it may be suitable to have low-lying power lines which are beneath the altitude at which birds may travel, carrying out carcass observations and mortality surveys as part of the comprehensive monitoring, and also to maintain the unattractiveness of the site to migrant birds. This is achieved by avoiding any type of cultivation or plantation of green areas in or around the site, and also prevention of garbage or other solid or liquid waste in or near the sites. Minimizing the vertical spread of power lines, having lines in horizontal plane, as soon as if possible, and that reduces the collision risk for birds. Installing visibility enhancement objects such as warning spheres, bird deterrents, or diverters or bird reflectors to minimize the possibilities of bird collisions, and that happened in many transmission lines connecting the wind plants, the private sector wind plants located in Gulf of Suez to the transmission lines belonging to EHC, even in 220 kV or in 500 kV. Thank you very much, and welcome to have any question or clarification.
Thank you very much, Engineer Iman. A very interesting experience indeed in Egypt, and a very appreciated work that is online. A couple of questions already are coming. For example, Catherine is asking, are you planning also to include collision prevention measures for bats? So obviously, all what was perhaps said was focused on birds. How about bats? Are they considered in any way still?
Yes, the latest studies done under the protocol between we have committee from EETC and EEAA and the RCRE, and that committee working on the bird monitoring in Gulf of Suez project related to the private sector and also the HMB program. So the last studies, including the chapter for bats, and the consultant make some recommendation for that, and especially in autumn and the seasons, because autumn and spring seasons are the migratory seasons for bird in the Gulf of Suez buses. So it's undertaken in the latest studies.
Great, thank you very much. There are a couple of questions, related ones on the radar. From one side, Ibrahim is asking, did the work on the radar started? Does it cover wind farms and power lines? And a related question from Brian is saying is, how effective is the radar in detecting flocks, and how big, dense does the flock need to be, I think, in order to be reliably detecting passing birds?
Under the protocol, we have two methodologies. One is the visual methodology, which is by the observers, the bird observers, and that what happened during the 3 last years or 4 last years, and the radars under implementation. The radar not installed right now. It planned to install for the private sector wind plants, maybe in the next inshallah 6 months. So all the data now from the visual, from the observers, from the human people. But till now, we haven't radars in the areas of the private sector. But NREA, New and Renewable Energy Authority, has radars installed maybe 10 years ago in Jabal Zayt, and that radars cover the projects, the wind projects, not the I think not the transmission lines area. It covers the wind project. Maybe the range for radars which will be installed in Gulf of Suez in the private sector, it will have big range to cover the plant itself and also the near transmission lines.
And for that, so it is now clear for the radar covering wind farms and not power lines. And for the question of Brian, is it for the wind farms then? It is detecting flocks, and is it a reliable tool that you think in the way in the area where it is now operated?
Yes, I think because from the observation only, the studies done detecting flocks. So the radar will be I think more more reliable or more دقيق, more
accurate in detecting the flocks.
more accurate than visual, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, a couple of other questions that I'm trying to bring things that are related. From one side, there is a great interest in the experience of Egypt, and there's a question also from Ibrahim on how, where, or how this is being documented in a way that would allow people to look at this experience and use it as a case study. And also, there's a related, also a kind of a question to that, a question from John, who would like to know more about the active turbine management, the ATMP. So perhaps, are there areas or are there locations or websites or where we can get, or the different participants can get more information about the experience of Egypt?
يعني as I mentioned, the protocol signed between the governmental entities and led by RECRE, Regional Energy Center.
Yeah.
So I think on their website, on RECRE website, they have already issued a lot about the HMB program and about the Egypt initiative, because it was the first time for Egypt, and I think for يعني الحمد لله Egypt did the initiative for the that program and the bird migratory related to the the agreements with the IFIs to reserve or to maintain the bird during their migration. The HMB program, Active Turbine Management Program, it was the initiative come from the RECRE, and they was يعني the leader for that program. And we as Egyptian Electricity Transmission Company, working with the RECRE, we have two buses, both of the agreement which contracted between ETC and the investor to purchase the generated electricity from the wind project. And that agreement including the schedule for the shutdown on demand and the HMB program to have the the least shutdown on demand for the turbine and to preserve the bird themselves. And also we are working with the committee to have the accumulated data in in Gulf of Suez for that sites, and when we have any wind plant under construction, we conduct the studies, the consultants conduct the studies under construction and after the operation for 2 years for the plans. And we have in the future, inshallah, accumulative data for the whole area in Gulf of Suez. And we consider is that learning by doing. It's a curve for learning by doing from the past and the present and future, inshallah.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think also for those interested, the Migratory Soaring Bird Project website include important also information on Egypt. So does the WEAA website. And indeed, this is experience. It's not only learning by doing, but it has been a pioneering experience, I would say. And no worry that, no wonder that the MSB project in Egypt did won in 2020 the Energy Globe Award for their mainstreaming efforts in the energy sector. So that also witnesses for that success. A couple of questions also related, Nikos from Greece and McNannon from Ethiopia. They're related questions over the monitoring for mortality, the monitoring programs that are taking place, and the effectiveness of the mitigation measures applied, and the joint monitoring program with the conservation sectors. So basically, before passing that to Engineer Iman, I would also respond to a related point about the mitigation examples that were given, telling that under the MSB project and the MAVA-funded Safe Flyway Energy project, Egypt is also proceeding into having a Powerlines guidelines that include many of the examples referred to by Engineer Iman, and having a national document that I know that in its final stages of finalization. So yes, I know about Caracas surveys that are taking place, monitoring programs. Would you like to comment on the monitoring programs taking place and the effectiveness of these, Engineer Iman, please?
Yes, as you mentioned, Dr. Osama, that monitoring program are doing by the consultant themselves. We contracted consultant to do the monitoring program, in especially in Gulf of Suez region, and also in another region. The environmental social impact assessment, because it is a monitoring program required from the IFIs especially. So a lot of monitoring program done for transmission lines in Gulf of Suez and in the region all over Egypt. No, sometimes not its bus for bird migration, but the monitoring program done for that transmission line. And as you mentioned, the EEA colleagues are working now to issue the power lines guidelines, and what about the monitoring program, and what about the mitigation of bird migration, and to enhance the process, because we have during the last years some activities, some done by EEA, some done by WETC, some done by RCRE, some done by NREA. But now we are wanting to have a comprehensive activities to enhance the guidelines for bird migration and for power lines, especially in carcass activities and bird monitoring.
Very good. Thank you very much. And finally, there are a lot of I think those are more comments. People are congratulating on the how you have inserted bird considerations within the power purchasing agreements. They think this is a very advanced and good step that guarantee that these considerations will be looked after as all projects go. And the final comment has been on the big investment that was put into the bird conservation. So there is a big investment, and I know also the MSB project in Egypt did a calculation of those investments from the different partners in collaboration with WEAA, and the result was millions of US dollars have been put in the last 2018 till mid 2020. I think something like around $5 million US have been the envelope of the investment into that. So that has been a huge and impressive, really, contribution. Great, thank you very much. Without further ado, I think we thank you, Engineer Iman. You're most welcome to stay with us. If more questions arise on Egypt, we will try our best to look at it. Our colleagues have posted the website of the Migratory Soaring Bird Project in the web, in the chat box for those interested. to carry along. And without further ado, I would welcome the second speaker, and we welcome Dr. Luca, our North European participant coming from Italy to flavor the med perspective of this webinar, and welcome him with us, and to put us in the picture of the Terna's commitment to protect bird life and their efforts when it comes to the Powerlines sector. Dr. Luca, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I think it's a very interesting webinar in order to share experiences between utilities company and NGOs. I'm Luca Moiana, and I'm an naturalist. I've been working with Terna for the last 12 years on the environmental department. Terna is the TSO company, meaning it's a transmission grid operator, is the Italian grid operator, and is in charge of designing, building, maintaining, and managing the transmission grid. We have more than 74,000 kilometers, and we only manage high voltage lines. From the bird perspective, this line cannot cause electrocution, but the main risk we are facing and we are trying to mitigate is collision. Of course, sustainability and protecting biodiversity is a fundamental aspect of the sustainability approach of Terna. Plastic spirals, we use the white and red colors, and we have more than 400,000 diverters on the whole Italian grid. Few years ago, we did try to find new diverters, but we couldn't find any diverter that it was suitable for the installation on a high voltage line. So we carry on putting plastic spirals, and they seems to work very well, because we also did some testing with carcasses and under the new line or existing line under migratory corridors in order to find collided carcasses, but the results are very satisfying. Another approach that was put in place for a very special project was the radar monitoring. As you will see here in the upper right map, you can see a line that connected Sicily and the southern part of Italy, Calabria. And that part is very important for the migratory birds coming from Sub-Saharan migratory birds. They concentrate in that part, and they tend to cross in big flocks. So from our point of view and from the expert, we consulted in the designing process. The position of the line was safe and sustainable, but the ministry, in order to issue the authorization of the building for building the line, requested monitoring 24/7 using radar and also ornithologist on the place. So we did this study. The study lasted 4 years, 1 before the construction and 3 after the construction of the overhead line. We recorded more than 100,000 passages over the strait. It was very important because the combination of the two approaches or two techniques, meaning the radar that could see birds up to 1.5 kilometers and the presence of ornithologists that could tell the species and of the bird. It was very important because we could collected a lot of data. This was important for the line, and we will see later, but it was also scientifically very important because we collected a lot of data on migratory birds on that point. It is one of the 3 main points for migratory birds on the Mediterranean. As you will see, the data show differences in numbers on the months of the passages for each species. And that was interesting enough. We could also tell the age of the flying birds up to the overhead line, and this was reassuring since they all migrate higher than the new line. Again, another important data we got from the radar study was the migratory routes locally, and you could tell that they really changed according to the period of the year, but also with the weather. But in case of bad weather, they tend to migrate along the coast, meaning they don't get interested by the new line. In case of good weather, they tend to soar to a very high altitude, meaning they pass over the overhead line with no problem. Another important byproduct of the study was the data on nocturnal migrants, mostly passerine. They were flying at night in order to avoid predators. It was a very interesting study because it could correlate the number of passages to the hour of the night. But all the nocturnal migrants, they fly very high, so up to 450 meters. So there's no intersection with the overhead line. As I said before, all the data were a lot, and they seem to be very interesting for the scientific community. So we decided to have an open data approach, and I'll be happy to share the link with you. You can go there and see the results of the study, but also download all the raw data collected by ornithologists and also by the radar in order to do your study or to analyze some parts of the project you're interested in. Another internship in partnership we have with the environmental organization regards the installation of nesting boxes. And these nesting boxes have been put in place for 20 years now, and they tend to represent also a local action of conservation, since they mostly work in areas where there are no cavities for natural nesting. So birds tend to nest in our boxes, and locally you can have a positive effect on population that don't find rotten trees to nest in. Finally, since the approach of birds is such a wide theme, and it needs to be approached from different point of view in the same company. We started in 2017 the Avian team, that is a working group made of different colleagues from local areas, but also from different departments, and they are focused on the birds problem. Another thing that we started the past year was the first courses on bird life for operators under the lines, in order to manage in case we find collided birds, but also in order to collect data while they are out doing maintenance on our lines. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luca, for this interesting presentation. And I think we will keep receiving questions. So I would ask people to continue post their questions, or also there has been a short aspect. If you re-put some of the last questions, if you can reinsert for those who did insert in the last 15 minutes, I would ask them to reinsert, please. And then without further ado, I would also now, if you don't mind, move to the final, last but not least, presentation from our engineer, Tariq Kanair, from the Royal Society for the Protection of Nature in Jordan, representing two utility companies in the presentation. So, Engineer Tariq, over to yourself, please. Tariq, you are muted. If you would like to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tariq Kanair. I'm from the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature, RSCN. Allow me to speak in Arabic as agreed with the BirdLife International. Our colleague Atef, he is interpreting. I would like to thank BirdLife International and all our colleagues from Erbil Electricity Company and all the other Jordanian entities and authorities that they are cooperating with us to resolve all the relevant and related problems related to the bird migration in Jordan, especially those problems related to the coalition and to the electrician of the birds. So the RSCN is conducting a deep cooperation within international NGOs like the BirdLife International and other Jordanian local electricity companies to protect these birds. First of all, I would like to underline the importance of Jordan in relation to the birds migration. The geographical localization of Jordan is in the central point of the regional Carrefour for the migration or flyways coming from Europe to Asia and from Europe to Africa. So the Rift Valley is a very highlighted and important flyway for birds. Millions and millions of birds are crossing this flyway to avoid the cold weather in Europe during winter and to avoid the hot weather during summer in Africa. So Jordan is a main pillar on the national level, a main pillar in the birds migration, because this flyway, which is located on the western flank of the Jordan Hashemite kingdom, this flyway starts from Yarmouk on the north until reaching the Gulf of Aqaba on the south, on the Red Sea coastline. Jordan is one of the first initiated countries signed the CBD agreement to protect, or the CMS agreement to protect birds or migrating birds. Jordan lately signed the soaring migrating birds to confirm our role and our important role and our responsibility to respect our guests. Those birds are our guests, and we need to protect our guests as we receive them on our territories. So we need to provide them a very safe flyway. The threats of the migrating birds while crossing the Jordan flyways, first of all, is the undergoing development in sensitive areas. This development we want to mean by that the land use development. We have more than 27 important and highlighted sites and locations for bird migration, especially for the soaring migrating birds. So objective is to develop a guideline for the power lines and the land use studies to detect and to underline these areas to help for a further more protection plans in the future. The second threats, it's the wind farm sites, especially when those farms are located on the flyways, especially or specifically in the Rift Valley Flyway, which is located on the eastern part of Jordan. Unfortunately, the most of the wind farms have been chosen and selected on the flyway, unfortunately, which is the second important bird migration way in the world. So our responsibility is to keep going within our cooperation with. Actually, Jordan is implementing these wind farms because we are in need of electricity. Yes, we are enhancing this wind farm sites, but we need to mitigate to mitigate to, we need to develop a bird migration guidelines within the electricity companies and the Jordanian authorities. And we need to develop these guidelines because we need to turn off these wind farms once birds are crossing the flyways. So we founded a national committee dedicated in protecting birds, and we developed a national databases which it is considered as a treasury for us because all the data is open and shared with all the authorities, and it's monitor and it's under the responsibility and monitoring of the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature. And we are targeting so Jordan received the international reward in the leadership of migrating bird protection. And the other threats are related to the power line and the dangerous pylons. And this is what I will talk into details later on furthermore. And we have also other water and poisoning water, which is under the pollution threats. So we try within the local authorities to prohibit chemical products that they use to infect water. And also there is another threat, which is the overhunting. As you know, that the Royal Society for Conservation of Nature is dedicated to nature conservation and to reinforce the hunting law within the Jordan territories. So what we did in the RCN is to develop the best guidelines for the best hunting practices. So we're teaching our hunters to be aware and to be sustainable. So these guidelines includes different awareness program and guidelines, and we try to distribute it in all over the Jordanian districts. It's like it represents an ethic program and the ethic guidelines for all the hunters and related people. Now, today I will talk about the electrocution and the collisions and the risk of these threats on birds. So the first one is the risk of electrocution, and the second one is the risk of collusion. The first one is related to the high voltage power line. When the birds are correlated directly to these lines, we have to how does it happen? It happens through the conductor wires in all tensions or in high and very high tension lines. As you can see in the picture, birds can face directly these wires or these conductors. Sometimes the bird cannot see these lines, and this is what it causes the direct death for the migrating birds. And there are also many other factors in these sensitive areas, especially when the power lines are located in the highlighted flyways for migrating birds. Actually, these birds are flying in a lower altitude, and this is increasing the collision and electrocution during their migration. But when the birds are traveling on higher areas, it's avoiding them to have these accidents within the power lines. The bird electrocution, as you can see in this picture, it can be when the birds are using these pylons, the middle and the low tension pylons, the birds can stop on these actually pylons. As you can see, a kind of collision can happen between the wings of the birds and the face to ground contact, as you can see it in this picture. So this electrocution can happen directly on the bird. But there is also another type of collision. As you can see, the bird can stop close to this conductor or to these wires, and it can happen directly through the collision between the bird and these wires. And this what will conduct to, this is what actually conduct to a direct electrical contact between the birds and the wires. The Jordanian experience related to the bird electrocution, actually, we didn't know about this type because we call it the silent killer of birds. We had no data related to this topic. So, because actually once the birds are dead, other animals can come and eat this bird. So we didn't, before 2019, we didn't conduct any assessment related to the electrified or electrocuted birds. But in 2019, we in the southern Jordan, we decided to conduct migrating bird assessments, especially related to the Egyptian vulture. So we conducted a specific assessment, negative impact assessment, in the south of Jordan in 2019 in autumn. So a national team from RSCN and other consultants and from BirdLife International, they participated all to this specific and specialized assessment to study the power lines in the middle and the southern part of Jordan, to assess and to monitor their negative impacts. And we registered more than 12 dead birds in the Jafar area, which is the most dangerous power line for birds, for migrating birds in Jordan. So by our agreement within the National Electricity Company, within the 3 years before this assessment, we discovered that there is a total of 52 power cuts caused by this these collisions and electrocution. So there is sometimes we have some electrocution and collisions which not causing power cuts, but we conducted our assessment to calculate or to document the power cuts, and this is the total of the power cuts since 2015 until 2018. So 3 years before the conducted assessments related to the negative impact of these power lines on the migrating birds. So our aim, it was also to conduct a socio-economic assessment in the main area to assess the socio-economic impact on the local citizens. So what we did is we decided to make a formal correspondence within the electricity distribution company to sign a memorandum of understanding to cover the insulation in the southern part of Jordan, specifically in Ma'an area. So our commitment, we are committed to respect the migrating birds flyways, to protect these flyways. And there is also an ethical and moral responsibility that we are holding here in Jordan to protect these birds and also to study and assist the socio-economical or socio-economic impact, not only on the birds and nature conservation, but also on the local citizens. So now we are working within the electricity distribution company to have for the implementation of all our guidelines in the field. So now we know that there are different threats, specifically the electrocution and the collisions threats. Now in Jordan, we are assessing and testing the dead birds. We are studying these birds, and we are actually monitoring. We are actually studying scientifically studying the causes of the death of these birds, and we now have a very practical data which is helping us to document these cases, but also to avoid further accidents. Sometimes we try to save these birds, but unfortunately the electrocution causes a direct death of the bird, and it's destroying everything in the bird body. In autumn 2020, we received an alarm about an electrocution or power water cuts, which has been caused by electrocution and collisions caused by migrating birds. So the water cuts has been caused by this accident, and it lasted for a long time, and citizens started to complain to the water company and to say that they don't receive water, they don't have water supply. As you can see in the picture, we found that this bird was standing or has been actually electrocuted on the main power line, and we actually directly put this news in the national magazines, and we conducted we actually to aware the national authorities to avoid this kind of accidents, and we directly conducted a specialized assessment in the north of Jordan, and we have been surprised, totally surprised, because we found more than 85 dead birds in the Akedar area, which is the waste management center of the north of Jordan, which is the main waste center of the biggest northern districts of Jordan, Mafraq and Irbid. So this is a stop migrating birds hotspots. We found that all the power lines surrounding these sites were a real threat for the migrating birds. So we found more than 85 dead birds around the area when we conducted our assessment. We have been surprised and shocked when we found these dead bodies of the bird. So we directly decided to sign an MOU with the Irbid District Electricity Company, aiming to decrease this bird mortality caused by the electric power under the management of the Irbid Electricity Company. And we have been well received by the Irbid Electricity Company, and they demonstrated a serious behavior to actually to actually avoid this kind of accidents, especially, and this project has been funded by the Egyptian vulture protection project and by the migrating soaring birds to protect the flyways of these migrating birds, and we estimated we actually dedicated $60,000 for to buy this insulation material, plastic insulation material. So we know now that the electrocution is a national and regional threat. For that, we are conducting a new plan for mitigating for impact for mitigating measures, and we are developing a national guidelines to actually reduce the negative impacts within the power lines to protect the migrating birds. And we are working on isolating more than 1,000 pylons in those identified hotspots. We also will work to proceed directly and quickly to sign the MOU with the EDCO, the electricity company, the national electricity company of Jordan, to implement the MOU and to insulate the pylons and the power lines. We are also targeting a training course on the national and regional level to protect the migrating birds, and to develop a training section in the Royal Academy for Powerline, including developing a training curriculum for energy sector and power lines impact and mitigation. We try also to develop a database for power line section on the to prepare a national database with and to relate this and to share this database with local authorities, private sector, and other NGOs through an associated mobile application. So within this database, we have all the hotspot areas, and we we have all the mitigation measures to avoid negative impact, to make of Jordan a safe flyways for migrating birds. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Engineer Tariq. And very important and interesting presentation indeed again. And let us start with tackling the questions, if you don't mind. So I will try to distribute them between the two speakers as we got it. There is a question, there has been, for Dr. Luca, there is a lot of appreciation on the open data approach that the company is following. Liam, for example, from the RGI, the Renewable Grid Initiatives, whom I take the opportunity to thank for their valuable collaboration, including for this, setting up this webinar, is asking what is done with the data and how is it used?
The data for the migratory birds on the Strait of Messina were part of the authorization for the new line. So we did an analysis on that, and we sent a report to the ministry in order to have the permitting issued by the minister.
Right, thank you. And a question for Tariq, for Sam again. Your description of the round table in collaborating with the different stakeholders, Tariq, in Jordan, that includes both the developers, the utility companies, the different stakeholders. Any challenges? How do you describe it? Is it working? Is it serving the purpose, and any challenging in doing it?
التحديات ليست كبيرة كما
Challenges are not that important because the threats of the power lines on migrating birds is a huge economical
Sorry, Tariq, we lost you a bit, it seems.
حلول وأن لديها حلول، وهذه الحلول ستكون تقريبا مجانية على شركة الكهرباء، بحيث أنه الممولين سيعملون على تمويل توفير مواد العزل، والمطلوب من شركة كهرباء إربد توفير الأيدي العاملة وتوفير المهندسين لتركيب هذه المواد. فكان الترحيب كبير لتنفيذ العزل في هذه المناطق، لأنهم يواجهون مشاكل كبيرة مع المجتمع المدني و
reduce and decrease the complicated problems in terms of maintenance or in terms of actually avoiding future issues. So we consider this as long-term agreement and MOUs, and we always took into consideration to take all the official and legal permits to sign these MOUs. And we thank God because the MOU took a long time to be signed, but now we are signing this agreement with our partners and stakeholders.
Thank you for that. Dr. Luca, it seems that you have mentioned that your company is working outside Italy. Do you perform, if this is the case, similar programs outside Italy when this happens? And a related, in a way, question about when it comes to the bigger picture. Some countries in the south, they're facing issues in applying the strategic environmental assessment approach. There are good examples in the south about environmental impact assessment when it comes to a site level, but probably at the strategic level, this is becoming difficult. Any experiences from your perspective on that kind of work?
For the first question, the general approach on biodiversity is for the company, for Terna in general, and for the holding. So it's spread it out to other parts of the company, and the approach should be the same, according always to the national laws where we go and work on that. Talking about the strategic environmental approach, it's an interesting part. It's very important in order to conduct that part easily and to have to take the right path to the environmental impact assessment. So I have no direct experience on the strategic environmental approach. We come after that. We collaborate with the colleagues regarding that are focused on that point. And sure, sometimes it gets mixed up with the environmental impact assessment, but in my opinion, my personal opinion, it should be different and more on a regional level, on a program level.
Many thanks for that. And also a related question, since you in a way mentioned the issue of abidance by the local laws. There has been also a question by Muna about the legislative framework. Are we moving from an initiative taken from utilities to abiding by the law? Are we going beyond the legal instruments to ensure that we do what is best to the birds? How do you describe this relationship between initiatives taken from the side of the companies into the law abidance?
Well, in my opinion, the mandatory request from the authorities is just the starting point. Because I can tell Terna is not doing the minimum by the law. Is always doing the best job it can do in that moment. So in my opinion, from how we approach the problem, the request from the authorities is the starting point.
Excellent, thank you very much. Tariq Ibrahim is asking, what species are most affected by power lines in the case of Jordan, and do we know why?
معظم الطيور التي تسبب تهديد على أو تسبب انقطاع معك اوكي. اكثر الطيور
the most threated birds, and they are also threatened by these power lines. Those are bigger birds, the soaring birds. Most of them are soaring birds, like the storks and the eagles, the steppe eagles, the shetland eagle, and also the snake eagles and the Egyptian vultures. These are threatened birds, and these are threatening birds for the power lines, especially for the Ma'an power lines in the southern of Jordan. As you could see in the picture that the Egyptian, the stork and the Egyptian vultures, as I showed you, those are the most threatened and threatening birds for the power lines. So the bigger birds and the soaring birds, because the small birds actually are not treating, and they are not that much treated, because the length of their wings are very short. So there is no direct contact with the wires or the electrical conductors.
Thank you very much. And can I ask all participants to put their questions on the question Q&A rather than on the chat box, please. So let's continue. If you don't mind, we have other questions. For example, there is a general question I would pose to both speakers, actually. Olena is asking if you are having bird protection devices installed already, using it, and which manufacturers you are using if you are in that kind of action.
The bird protection device, I mean, we use diverters. It's not bird protection device for us because we don't have electrocution. We use diverters. We have one producer that is in an Italian company, and we use those since they are reliable. They seem to work. From literature, we have very good results. And they are easy to put on place, and they stay in place very well. For what we can tell from our monitoring under the lines, they generally work very well since we find few carcasses. I mean, even not statistically significant.
Excellent. I know in the case of Jordan, the installation work is yet to take place, but probably, Tariq, are there any devices that are being used at the moment in Jordan or not yet?
أود الإشارة لابد أن أشير بأن
I would like to underline that in Jordan, we are really on the very beginning start of our mitigation measures. For example, in the northern side of Jordan, which is a very important threat for our migrating birds, we, within the Egyptian Vultures project and our consultants, it's to make an immediate decision to use mitigation measures and tools within the Irbid district electricity companies. We use insulating tools, but unfortunately with Irbid electricity, we had no the fund to buy these tools. And we contacted, in Jordan, these tools are not existing. So we contacted a US-based company to buy and to purchase these tools. And actually, the electricity tools which are used here in the northern of Jordan are very different from those used in US or other countries. So what we decided to do is to, first of all, assess these power line techniques. And we are now preparing in the preparation phase of signing an MOU with the Irbid District Electricity Company to provide them with the needed tools to protect and to insulate these lines, and also to provide them with the needed measures of the needed mitigation measures, and to specify the most important hotspots in this area. Actually, as we are in the beginning, what we are trying to do is to make all our efforts to decrease the negative impacts on migrating birds by using this immediate decided mitigation measures within the Irbid Electricity Company.
Thank you, Tariq. Let us also proceed. There have been a couple of questions. Mohammed from Morocco is having a question. Unfortunately, probably Iman will not be able to respond by now, but still Dr. Luca perhaps can. How you are implementing some of the measures in the respective country. For example, shutdown and demand in Egypt. Was this done voluntarily by the wind farm or imposed by the authorities? I can go by that. That was an agreement, and that in a way was a mandatory process. If the shutdown on demand was implemented voluntarily, what would be by the wind farm companies? Are these public or private? The shutdown on demand is now asked from all kinds of projects in Egypt, and that's a binding by the law. Installing radar to study bird migration on the Strait of Messina, Italy. Same questions as above. Was this implemented voluntarily by Terna or imposed by law regulations? Dr. Luca?
Going back to your previous question also, the law requested to have a monitoring device running 24/7 for 4 years. So we could do something like minimal and go away with that and get the permit. What we did was the radar and was all the project involved. So it was starting from the law, but there was a huge part that was voluntary. And also the association with the ornithologist was voluntary. Otherwise, we could have just points on radar and give the 8 and say everything was right.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Osama, our colleague, the manager of the MSB project in Egypt from WEAA is asking Tariq, how about, is there EIA studies as compulsory for the new power lines in Jordan?
جميع المشاريع الكبيرة في
all
الأردن
the huge power line implementation projects in Jordan are subject of environmental need assessment in Jordan. But for the moment, no. There is no pre-environmental impact assessment for the new power lines projects. But for the main power line project from the north to the southern Jordan, which is the most important power line project, the National Electricity Company requested the expertise of the RSCN to conduct an environmental impact assessment within this project. We now are obliged to cooperate with these power line projects, with the existing projects, but in the future, as I know, in Jordan, all these projects will be a compulsory and an obligation to conduct an environmental impact assessments. And these projects need to take into their consideration the biodiversity and the very sensitive hot spots before they implement their power line projects.
Thank you, Tariq. Brian is asking both speakers if there are any experiences of trials in the use of lasers as bird deterrents.
No, for Terna, that doesn't sound as a solution for the collision, because it will be put it all over the network, and it's really hard to manage for what we know at the moment, but maybe in the future some other technologies can come up.
Thank you. Tariq, any experiences with the laser as a deterrent in Jordan?
نحن الآن بصدد أخذ إجراءات عاجلة كما ذكرت.
Now, as I said, we are taking new measures to insulate the power lines, but in the future maybe we will conduct a technical assessment, and we will use any practical and useful tools to avoid these collisions and electrocutions. Even if we will find ourselves using lasers, we will use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dunya is asking, probably also to both speakers, what is the frequency of the monitoring programs and survey bird mortality along a power line?
We use an approach based on the carcass removal. So we do a test with the carcasses, and we go back after first time 3 days, then 8, then 11 days. And according to the remains we find, we decide the timing of the monitoring. Because it depends on the habitat, on the scavengers in the area, and so on.
Thank you. Any comments from Tariq? The frequency of the surveys that are conducted in Jordan for power lines?
إذا كان الجواب
Yes.
معني في مناطق معينة.
If it's related to specified hotspots in Jordan, when we are talking about what we call the hotspots, the frequency is high. We registered a high number of birds, dead birds, in the north of Jordan. But on the national level, the frequency is decreased. For example, we spotted only 150 dead birds on the national level, but the most of them, the frequency was higher in the north of the country.
Sorry if I didn't make perhaps ourselves clear, or perhaps a gap in passing the info. Tariq, the information asked is about the frequency of doing the surveys, not the frequency of birds having being victims of due to collision and electrocution risks. So, for example, are they happening twice during the migration seasons, for example, or on a more accurate basis, depending on days and specific timings? So what is the frequency of carrying out the survey of a power line? Sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
نعم كما ذكرت
Yes, as I mentioned before, we started in 2019 and we are in 2021. So in 2020, for example, we covered all the hotspots, and now we try to cover all the areas through environmental, through these assessments on the hotspots, but not on the national level. On the national level, we need more time, actually, more time to actually to increase the frequency of our assessments. So the most important thing is the frequency of the highlighted frequency of the electricity companies who are providing us with all the needed data that they are finding in the sites. But we will double our efforts to conduct environmental impact assessments in the future, and we will take into consideration the collisions and the electrocution in the future. So this is a very highlighted and important subject. We're still on the begin, but we will sure take this into consideration to increase the frequency of our assessments within the RSCN, the Royal Society for the Conservation of Nature.
Thank you very much. Dr. Luca, also a question related to data and the way it is there. Does the data segregate, is the data segregated in a way that would allow, for example, to identify collision taking place on weather adverse conditions from normal weather conditions when data is looked at?
Are you talking about the Messina Strait, or generally speaking?
Yes, I think in general, that is a general question, perhaps.
The general question, we don't collect weather data, but usually they get put on the note. So we can do when we have surveys. Of course, they go out. They mark data and time, and also the meteo situation, but it's if it's peculiar. Let's say if it's a the regular day with no big weather events, there's no note on that. One thing is that the only bird collided we found on the line on the Messina Strait was after a huge storm. So we found it near the line, but we couldn't directly relate the dead bird with the line because there was no sign, evidence of the collision. It got attributed, and it was mostly related to bad weather, we think. But it was the only one in 4 years.
Thank you. Tariq, there is also a question from McNannon, and he's asking, showing the table perhaps you have showed is showing a trend in an increase in power cut due to collision and electrocution. Is there a specific reason you think for that?
للأسف ما دمنا لم
Unfortunately, as we are not conducting real and serious measures, yes, the power cuts will continue, especially that these power cuts are on the most highlighted hotspots of Jordan. So we need to directly take actually immediate measures and decisions. And this is what we are doing in the near future to insulate this to this hot spot, specifically in the north of Jordan. Yes, the power cuts and the bird collisions and electrocutions continue, but we are planning to conduct more monitoring activities and to insulate more of these power lines in those hotspots.
Thank you. Also to both speakers, perhaps the general impression, Brian, the general impression about which is more significant problem, electrocution or collision. We understand that with high voltage, it is collision. With medium and low voltage, perhaps it's electrocution. Is this the way it is? This is the significance of the both threats?
Yes, we can always exclude the electrocution due to the distances of the wires. So there's no bird that can get electrocuted, and also on our power station, the tensions are different and are wide enough in order to the birds not to get electrocuted.
Thank you. Tariq, how is it in Jordan? Which is more significant problem, electrocution or collision?
الانطباع العام أو نعم مفهوم. نعم أوكي. برأيي وما
Yes, from my perspective, after the assessments that we conducted, it's the electrocution. The electrocution cases is very high, and through my personal experience, that the collusion has no that important threat actually on the migrating birds. The most important threats for us is the electrocution. So, as I repeat, as always, we need to take immediate decisions and to reinforce our MOU within the electricity companies to avoid further electrocutions.
Thank you for that. And Mohammed again from Morocco, and this is also a time to appreciate all the efforts by GRIPOM in Morocco, by IUCN Med on working on the issue. He's asking Tariq about the situation with the utilities. When you approach the EDCO and when you approach Irbid Electricity, both companies, about the electrocution problem, did you experience any hesitancy to cooperate from the companies? In general, he would like to know how easy the communication and negotiation was with these two companies. And they are indeed public companies, not private. So, because in Morocco, so far, it seems that the National Electricity Company is not easily going on board to cooperate. So how would you, Engineer Tariq, describe this relationship?
لابد أن أشير بأن الشركات الكهرباء
Yes, the national electricity companies are actually also private sector because they have cooperation agreement within the private sector. But when we faced and we tried to communicate with them, we discovered a very high. Actually, they demonstrated serious efforts because they know that they are facing challenges and they have moral and ethical national responsibility to apply our conservation projects. because I felt an interesting demonstration from Irbid Electricity Company, because they need our help to reduce their economical loss, and also they know that they want also to leave a moral footprint on the national conservation. So this goes in their interest to cooperate with the RCN, but also we need to highlight the good national reputation of RCN, and RCN is conducting a high-level national awareness program within these companies, and we are receiving important support on the national level from the governmental side and from these private companies or national companies side.
Thank you. And another related question, perhaps in Jordan, for the reported cases of cuts by the electricity companies, how does the electricity company define and decide on an incident that it is caused by the birds?
عندما تواصلنا مع شركات
When we started to communicate with the national electricity companies, we found that once they have an alarm or a call indicating a power cut, the maintenance team, they go directly to the incident place, and they will directly document the reason or the cause of this power cuts. We are technically talking. So if it's related to the quality of these power lines, or if it's related to climate causes, or it's related to some electrocution or some collisions, accidents. And when it's related to migrating birds, they will see that the birds carcass is still on the power lines. So they will document, they will take the picture, and they will report that the cause of these power cuts are related actually to the migrating, are caused by migrating birds.
Thank you. A general also question about the involvement of the international financial institutions, and Donia on another side reminded us that by IFC guidelines, for example, regarding frequency of monitoring program, they are done every 2 years by IFC guidelines. But in general, the question was on the collaboration of international financial institutions, and probably that would have been for Iman in her absence. Let me try to relate to the experience of Egypt, where there is a huge relationship with the international financial institutions, who by applying their safeguards and developing their safeguards and being open to discussion of those safeguards have really went a long way into collaboration. And there is and where the focus has been primarily for wind farms. We know that there is a situation that IFC and others are now finalizing some work on the power lines. Also, I should take this chance to say that IUC and MED have developed a kind of a North Africa power lines guidelines, and now they are enhancing it and putting it in English. The original version has been in French, and I think those new interventions from the side of the IFIs in general and the collaboration from the conservation community is really vital into addressing this problem, and the collaboration of those among the other stakeholders, definitely including utility companies, is vital to try and put an end to this problem and to decrease that issue. So that is perhaps I hope I have in a way responded to that question. There has been also a question on for Tariq on the national committee and how is it working, and perhaps this is linked to the roundtable again, but how it was formalized, how it is working, and are the decisions that those are taken abiding at the national level?
أشكرك على هذا السؤال. تم
Thank you for this question. Yes, we founded this national committee through an official invitation and from the RCN and through an official correspondence within the Ministry of Environment. We felt the needs of the foundation of a national committee with different members representing different bodies. For example, the Ministry of Energy, the Electricity National Companies, the Ministry of Environment, RCN, and other national consultants. We felt and we realized the need of this committee, and this committee is meeting on a monthly basis, meetings or every 3 months. The most important decisions that have been taken by this committee is to found this national database and to communicate with the electricity companies and to enhance, to underline the necessity of migrating bird protection and the importance of the national database for those companies and other stakeholders. And the most important thing is to take the needed measures, the mitigation measures when needed. So the national committee is helping the stakeholders and also is always suggesting measures, and this national will continue. We will meet next month to talk about the electrocution. We will meet with the national electricity companies. The community was more focusing on wind farms, but now we are orienting its work and its responsibilities to the power lines to take further decisions related to the cooperation, nature within the electricity companies, and to conduct an official national effort within this. I can give you an example, like the most of the wind farms are respecting the measures, respecting the shutdown in demand, and it's funded by the IFC. But in project, for example, in Jordan, we still have some wind farm projects that they have not been funded by IFC or any other financial institutions. So the national committee is communicating with these projects to enhance them, actually, to put them into the picture and to include them in these cooperation national efforts, and maybe to try to look for funds from international financial institutions for these projects.
Thank you. Let me handle with the last two questions regarding time. Umberto, thank you for joining, and we highly appreciate the efforts of the Raptor MOU in general for Raptors and in this area as well. Umberto is asking for electrocution. A crucial issue is the use of the proper pylon, whether for mid or high voltage, that are safe for the birds. Are the Jordan and the Egyptian TSOs working on that? Tariq, in the absence of Iman?
Can you just repeat the question, Osama? Thank you.
Okay, for the electrocution, a crucial issue is the use of the proper pylon that are safe for birds. Is this taking place by the companies, transmission company system operators in Jordan and Egypt? Are they working on that?
نعم في الأردن.
Yes, in Jordan, as I already mentioned, we are working within the existing tools actually and material, because we didn't conduct an environmental impact assessment for these pylons or these poles. So what we are trying is actually to mitigate and to work within the existing tools and the existing material and equipment. In the future, we hope that we will conduct more environmental assessments to change or to use more safe pylons that will not cause or that will reduce or decrease the electrocution incidents in the future. So we hope that we will use more safe pylons in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Tariq. And yes, indeed, there has been, with the effort of some of the initiatives, a kind of an account of safe, unsafe pylons that are there, with recommendations of usage of it, and of course that falls under perhaps the mitigation issues, is to look at it, whether we can look at it, the existing ones, from the reconfiguration, from the insulation perspective of the perch deterrents or deflectors and other aspects. These are being looked at. The region is a bit coming new to it, I should say. So perhaps the experience is not big with the mitigation of existing power lines, but that is all coming on the work. More has been done perhaps on the new power lines, and that is the prevention aspect that many of our speakers referred to when it comes to the EIAs, the safe power line structure since the beginning, and with the contribution of IFIs. A final question also, Elena is asking, what is the source of funding for bird conservation activities that are run by the companies? Dr. Luca?
I don't know about it, because from our department we don't deal with funds.
Yeah. So basically, is it the company that have funded the activity that you have referred to, for example? Is that?
Oh yes, of course. It's part of the cost of the construction and authorization of the line. Sorry, I got the question now. Yeah. It's part of the industrial cost of building a line, the monitoring, all the mitigation, and so on, that gets in the budget of the project.
Which is a great experience to learn from the north, because as you said, those costs are embedded already within the overall costing structure. So those issues are all taken into account since the very beginning.
Yeah, they are part of the project. The project includes the mitigation and what we talked about.
Okay, thank you very much. And if there is a case to deal with existing lines, like a configuration or a mitigation, how does that go from a funding perspective?
It's part of the cost of the maintenance at that point. Mm-hmm. Let's say we have a problem, we have an issue somewhere, and the issue is demonstrated by, I don't know, we got problems with collision from seabirds. So we go there, we do some intervention on the line. It's paid by the maintenance of the company.
Excellent. Thank you for this clarification. Tariq, who is funding to date the work on the mitigation measures and the activities related to birds in Jordan?
كما تعلم سيد أسامة.
As you know, Mr. Osama, the most of our fund resources are through the funded projects within BirdLife International, like the EU Life the Egyptian vulture projects, or the soaring bird projects, or the safe flyway within the power line energy. So we don't receive any foreign funds for the moment, but in the near future, we are looking for further funded projects for the insulation project because it's really costly. For example, for the North Power Line of Jordan, it's it's 100 some of hundreds of kilometers of power lines. It's very costly. So we are looking for further funded projects within foreign institutions or other to also to conduct a national awareness program of the sensitivity of this power line threats on the migrating birds.
Thank you very much, Tarek. I think we are coming to an end of this discussion. As we promised, there will be future discussions and involving more partners, more countries. So I take the opportunity now to thank the speakers for their valuable input. I thank our interpreters also for his patience with us. I thank our funding institutions and collaborators again, who have been really instrumental for doing this, and thank the participation of all those who participated with us from all around the Mediterranean. It is highly appreciated. We can only promise that we will continue to do that kind of work. Thank you all very much and look forward for future opportunities. Thank you very much indeed.